Hello, and welcome to the Nick Lugo Show. I'm your host, Nick Lugo, and today I had on Steve Haffner. He is a professional magician who has, spent his life trying to discover and thwart our cognitive biases, all of the little human flaws that we have. And, now he spends his time not as a magician, but as a decision performance specialist. And he determines and he explains to you how these biases are affecting our daily lives and causing us problems and how we could get around them. So he spent a lot of time in this podcast talking about that exact thing. He tells you his story, and he's just such an engaging speaker. So without further ado, here is Steve Haffner. All right, let's do it. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Nick Lugo Show. Today, I have on Steve Haffner. He is a magician, and he has an incredible story. So I'd love for you to start with your story.
Yeah. Hi, Nick. Thank you for having me on. My story is pretty interesting. It goes in a couple different directions, but when you're in the situation you're in now, when you're in college, you're setting your course for your career. And when you're a senior in high school, you get to decide what you're going to do with the rest of your life. That's a big decision for somebody who's, 17, 18 years old. And so what do? You look at what your passions are, you look at what you're interested in, so you can decide, are you going to go into a trade, go right to work, or go to college, and what are you going to study? Well, big decision. So when it was time for me, I thought, what are my passions? And I loved writing, creative writing. I wrote poems and short stories, and I even wrote a whole rock opera to one of Queen's albums. I was kind of strange, but I loved writing, and I also loved performing because I was kind of a shy kid, but I loved getting in plays. And in high school, I got in all the theater productions because it was a way to express myself when I was a bit of an introvert, in real life, but on stage, I could do it. And so I love performing and writing. So what did I decide to make my career? What did I decide to study? Computer science. Yep.
Wow, that makes sense.
And my parents were kind of pushing me in that direction, but it was my choice, but it made sense because that was the safe way to go. There were tons of computer jobs, this was back in the early 80s. It was going to be a safe way to go. You could make good money as a programmer or getting into, IT or computers. So I thought, yeah, that's probably the way to go, because being some kind of artist or getting into acting or creative writing, that can be kind of iffy, not quite as secure as getting in the business world. So got a computer science degree, and that launched me on a 30-year career in IT and management. So I had all kinds of titles: systems engineer. I became a business analyst. In fact, that was my last job title before one bright and sunny morning, I quit. So here's what happened. This was around the time I had gotten married. I had a couple of young children, like 3 and 5, and I came across a book in a bookstore on magic. And I thought, hey, I loved magic when I was a kid. I wonder if my kids would like it. And so I got that book, learned some tricks, did them, kids thought it was kind of cool, but I really loved it. And now there's the internet. You can get all this magic tricks and lectures and stuff online. And so I really got into it. I joined the magic club. I would do charity events, magic for charity events. And I really loved it. And why? Because my passions, writing and performing, were coming back into play, because I could use both of those in magic, right? So I loved it, and it was a hobby, and I had it for a number of years. Well, I had this inkling in my head saying, you could make a living doing this. You could be a magician, because where I live in Louisville, Kentucky, there was a market there, and there was only 1 or 2 magicians full time. I'm like, I could do this. Well, another part of my brain was saying, what? Are you crazy? You've got a family to support. Things are going well. You've got a stable job, and you're going to quit to do magic tricks. Grow up. So I had that voice loud and clear in my head. So I kind of put that on the back burner, just shoved it aside. Well, a few years went by. I was in a situation where I wasn't loving my job. I had switched from the tech side to the management side. Wasn't loving it. And I still had that voice saying, man, you could become a magician, you know how to do it. And So it was tough. If you've ever, well, you're young, you probably haven't gotten to this point yet, but maybe in some areas of your life where you have a big decision to make, it's going to have a big effect on you, and you're struggling with it because there's a
Yeah.
couple of ways you can go, and that's hard. That's kind of painful, actually, when you've got that uncertainty, and we can talk about uncertainty in a little bit, but it's difficult, and our brain doesn't like it. And I was really struggling with it. Well, there was one morning I had driven to work. I was sitting in my car in the parking garage thinking about what should I do with my life. At my job, they had lost their contract. This was a company that had one contract and they lost it. So everybody within a year was going to have to find a new job. So I'm like, should I try to go into magic? Should I not? What do I do? And then a song came on the radio. So the song, I had never heard this song before. And in fact, I have never heard it on the radio since then. This was the one and only time this song came on. And some of the lyrics, I was just sitting there in my car listening to it, thinking, what am I going to do? And the lyrics said, there comes a time when you have to ask yourself, where am I going? What have I done? Are you taking the orders that you've been given, or are you breaking the rules with your own decisions? Isn't it time you tried? And this was called Living the Life. That's the name of the song by Martin Sexton. And I've found it, on YouTube, and I've listened to it since, but that was the only time I heard it on the radio. And it just hit me right then, coincidence, fate, God, whatever made that happen. I don't know. But I felt this wave of relief come over me. I know what I need to do. It was like, I have clarity. This is right. I should not pass up this opportunity. And it wasn't an irreversible decision too. If I went into magic and it didn't work out, I could get back into IT or, get back into the business world. So 10 minutes later, I walked into my boss's office and I said, Suzanne, I quit.
Wow. So tell me, how old were you when you got into magic? How old were you, as a hobby? How old were you when you quit? And yeah, sort of what was the timeline there?
I was, when I quit my job, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I got into magic as a hobby. I was probably about, let's see, we're going to go in reverse from how old I am now. So I was probably about 45. Okay. I would think 40 to 45 when I did that. So no, it had to be that's right, because I probably had it as a hobby for about 5 years.
Okay.
Thinking about it all the time. When can I make a living at this? And then it probably took me that long, 5 years, to make the decision to make that jump.
Yeah. And, well, I mean, I think your story is just so relevant. I'm in the Kelley School of Business, which is obviously a business school at Indiana University. And those choices that everybody makes when they're 17, 18 years old, what do I want to do? People have already made them, and they've made, in large part in Kelley is the place for the finance and accounting people to go, which is essentially comparable to computer science, right? IT in your day. They make this career choice and they say, you know what, I'm going to go with the one that gives me the most economic security. And well, along with that, the one that makes me not very happy on the day to day. So what really made you sort of switch gears and be like, all right, I'm going to pursue my passion, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I don't regret the fact that I did that I had that I went into IT, because I did like computer science. I did like programming. It's like figuring out a puzzle, and I'm all into games and puzzles. And that's, that was fun for me. But it didn't really, it align with my biggest passions, as you said. But I did have a secure, well-paying job for a long time, and that set me up. Now I'm in really good shape as far as, retirement goes, because of, the money I made during my career. But I felt like I had a lot of gifts, creative gifts, that I wanted to share and help and use them to make people happy, to bring joy to people, and especially kids. Because when I first got into it, I was doing kids shows when I got into magic. And I have since pivoted to speaking. I don't do magic shows as such now. I do speaking presentations on on flaws and illusions and how our subconscious mind affects our decision making. But it came out of what I learned from magic, and I still use magic tricks and demonstrations to show how some of this works. So I still get to do my passion of performing, but it's in the context of an educational program now.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, so I would love to get into the topic of, like cognitive biases and, like that's going to be the main point of this podcast. But one question I did have to ask was, first of all, you have a family, right? Second of all, you probably took a huge pay cut to go from IT to magician, talking to kids, right? So how did the family feel about this?
Yeah. Well, I say in my talks, I say, it was in 2011 in the middle of a recession when I made the dubious decision to quit my corporate career and do magic tricks. Oh, did I say dubious decision? Those aren't my words. They're my wife's words. But no, that's a joke because she was supportive. And when I talked about doing this, and because, I said, yeah, hey, after 6 months, if I'm just not getting any traction, I can go back because of my background, my experience, and being in IT. I can pretty much get a job anywhere,
Yeah.
But I'd always been frugal and made good, choices with saving money and investing it, and so I had a cushion. We had a cushion. We weren't, living day to day, so that allowed me to do it too. That gave me the confidence that I can go ahead and try this.
Yeah.
Because I'm not a big risk taker. Generally, my personality isn't one to take big risks. And people think, wow, what a huge risk you just took, giving up your corporate career. And in a way it was, but I did have that desire. I felt it would be a bigger risk to not tap into what I really felt that I wanted to do and made the best use of my gifts. So.
Yeah, I mean that's what I've seen as sort of like a trend when I interview, like successful people and people who've followed their dreams. Essentially, it's more of I didn't take the giant leap. It wasn't like it was like a huge moment where I risked everything and put my whole life on the line. It's like, no, I had a plan B, I had a contingency plan. Like it's not. I didn't really need to, like burn all my boats and go there. I just had to make a 6 month or like a little pivot, start doing a side job, something like that, so that I could start pursuing my dreams and give it a little shot.
And I call myself, I created the title Decision Performance Specialist. And because I talk about how, our subconscious biases and shortcuts and illusions affect decision-making, and how we could make much better decisions if we tuned in a little bit more to what's going on, at the inner subconscious brain level. So decision making like that, like the decision I made to quit my job and go into magic. I think you do have to be careful. Anytime you talk about following your passion, I don't think you just, like you said, you don't just jump into it. You have to think, do I have a cushion? Is my passion something that people want? And will pay for, is there an audience, and is it an audience that can pay for it and pay me for it, to do it? So there's a lot of things that go into that. And as I had mentioned, I had looked into the magic market in Louisville, the market for magicians, and saw that, there was room for me. If it was saturated, I wouldn't have done it.
Exactly. So it was practical, right? Like it wasn't just like a completely emotional throw caution to the wind moment. Right. So you became now, right? You're a decision-making specialist. You were a magician, right? What did you learn? Sort of explain to everybody, what cognitive biases we have, and, what are the human flaws that sort of, affect our ability to make decisions. Give us the breakdown.
Yeah, well, there's so many of them. And so this is what was interesting because, when you're a professional magician, you have to learn how to fool people. And so you have to learn a bit about human psychology. And what I discovered was the human mind is actually pretty easy to deceive. And we're all constantly being fooled, I say hoodwinked and bamboozled and snookered and swindled and hooked and reeled in all the time because of the way our brain works and it's set up. And, our brain has developed over millions and millions of years. And the oldest part that developed back when we were little animals, and all small animals have it, is the part that works at the subconscious level, and it's built to keep us alive, right? So there's the term reptilian brain, which, and there's a lot of neuroscientists say, well, it's not really a brain part anymore, that some of this functionality that we developed a long time ago works in different parts of the brain, and you don't really have a reptilian brain as they used to think. But the term lizard brain comes in, for reptilian brain. And I like to call it just the lizard. And it's not really a brain part, but it's the functionality of keeping us alive, the subconscious impulses and shortcuts that we have that were developed to keep us alive, keep us safe, so that we could pass on our DNA to future generations. The whole flight or fight response, that comes from the lizard. Now, I like that term because it's a metaphor, makes you think there's this little creature crawling around inside your head. And it kind of is, because now we have these two competing systems in our brain. And I'm sure you're, with all the experience you have talking to people in psychology and neuroscience, you've come across the term system 1 and system 2. And Daniel Kahneman, the psychologist who won the Nobel Prize in economics, and kind of started the whole behavioral economics field. He developed the term system 1 and system 2, the fast system and the slow system. And his book is called Thinking Fast and Slow. And, awesome book that he wrote for lay people. But so you got system 1, system 2. System 1 is what I call the lizard, and that's the part in the subconscious. The fast part that's trying to keep you alive. The thinking part, what you think about when you think about thinking, is system 2. It's the conscious part. It's the slow part. You think of it as the part that thinks through probabilities and sets goals and makes plans to achieve those goals and determines what your values are. That's all the stuff that you care about. That's your agenda, your goals and your values. Does the lizard, the system 1, care about your goals and values? No, it does not. It cares about one thing: keeping you alive, primarily by avoiding potential threats, recognizing them and avoiding them. And so it's that whole impulse, all of the things that are built inside us to keep us safe and keep us away from threats, that don't really serve us as much now. They did when they were developed, because we were living in the wild and our lives were threatened all the time. We could get eaten in any second. So we were always on the lookout for threats, And so there's a number of things, of biases that come out of those impulses. For example, the negativity bias, things that are negative, situations, things that have happened to us that have a negative impact on us, stick with us, create much more brain activity than positive things.
Oh yeah, it's like, if you walk on the street and you gain $10, you're like, oh yeah, that's great. It's like wonderful. But if you lose, like $10 fall out of your pocket and you lose it, that actually doubles the amount of feeling that you have. So like you felt like kind of happy when you gain the $10, but you just feel absolutely terrible, double the negative emotion when you lose $10, which doesn't make much sense.
Yeah. But if you think about it, think about back, the lizard brain system 1 kind of thing, about how it developed to keep us safe. It's also about keeping what you have, because keeping your nest safe, from predators, for example. So that loss aversion, that you talk about, we're trying to avoid something bad happening to us, and that's more important to us than gaining something. We love to make gains, to get new things, but it's not as important as keeping what we have at that level, that loss aversion level. And it's so interesting. There's also something called the endowment effect, which it's very similar to loss aversion, and we put much more value on something that we own over something that we don't own. So here's a great example. I love this one. So Dan Ariely, I don't know if you've heard of him. He's a
No.
behavioral psychologist out of Duke University. He's written some great books. Predictably Irrational is his most famous book. Anyway, he's got some good lectures and TED Talks out there too. He's a pretty funny guy. But he did the study. He's at Duke, and he did a study of basketball tickets. So of course, Duke is huge in basketball, but they have a very small arena, Cameron Indoors Arena, which doesn't hold very many people. And so they don't have enough seating for all their students. So they have a lottery for students to enter to get tickets, okay, to win the ticket.
Okay.
So what he did after they had the lottery for the big Duke North Carolina game one year, he called up a bunch of students who had either won or didn't win the tickets. And he asked them, first of all, if you didn't win the ticket, how much would you pay to get one of those tickets? And the average was, I believe, my numbers might be a little off, but I believe it was like $125.
Okay.
So, okay. So that's, for a lot of college students, that's a lot of money, but that's, about what
it's reasonable for a Duke game. Yeah.
Right. For a basketball game. So they asked the people who won the lotteries, who now had the tickets, what's the least amount of money you would give it up for? What would you sell it for? And it was in the thousands. It was like 2,000. It was 14 times. It was worth to the people that owned the ticket 14 times as much as it was to the people that did not own them. It's the same ticket, the same intrinsic value. They weren't any bigger of basketball fans than the people that didn't win. The only difference is that they owned it. So it's that endowment effect and that loss aversion phenomenon where we want to hang on to what we have. Golfers, for example, this is a great one too. They did these massive studies on professional golfers and their putting, and they found that professional golfers, but this probably applies to all golfers, what do you think they're better at? If they're putting to get a birdie or putting to avoid a bogey, which one do you think they would be better at?
So putting to get a birdie would be okay. So like it's a par 3, they're going for 2, right?
Right.
Okay. To avoid a bogey. So I would say they would be better putting for a birdie.
Nope.
No.
They putt better. Same, the same putts, because they took into consideration the types of, the length and the difficulty and everything, but they putted better to a significant degree when they're trying to avoid getting a bogey, because losses loom larger than gains for us. And they figured out all the millions of dollars that it cost professional golfers because they didn't putt as well when they were trying to get a birdie. Yeah.
Wow. And it could be the same putt, like there's no differences in terms of, it's just all psychology. And that's one of the things that I realized in terms of decision making, and also in terms of, just regular life. It's like, for the same decision, other factors could be of influence. So how much of the endowment effect or the negativity bias actually has an effect on our real life?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and some of the things going back to magic and what I learned through, I guess you'd call it study, learning from other magicians and getting into psychology a bit, which then led me, when I started my speaking career, led me to dig deeper into some of these people that we've talked about that are behavioral psychologists and behavioral economics and neuroscientists. But one of the things from magic that I learned is, it's a word that everybody associates with magicians, and that is misdirection, right? That they think that's how we do it. Well, magicians don't call it that. We call it directing attention, because that sounds more positive and deliberate. We're getting your attention focused here, so that it's not focused over here, but you can think of it as the same thing, misdirection. And the funny thing is, and I illustrate this when I'm giving a talk, I will do a trick and say, I misdirected you. I got your attention over here so easy, even though you knew here's the important thing, me holding this deck of cards in my hands, that's the important thing. And yet I directed your attention right here. just very easy. And you looked there, your attention was there, and I could do my secret move, and you didn't even see it. Even though that was the most important thing, I got your attention away from the most important thing extremely easily. Very, very easy to do. You have to structure your magic trick in a way that it doesn't seem like you're trying to direct somebody's attention. Yeah. The reason misdirection works so effectively is because we're very easily distracted. Okay. So go back to the lizard brain for a second. Here's how attention works. There's two levels to it. System 1 is the first level. Say you're walking in down a dark alley at night and unfamiliar neighborhood by yourself. Why you're doing that, I don't know. Don't ever do that.
Good advice.
Let's just say you're doing it. Okay. So where's your attention? It's everywhere. You're scanning, right? Because you're on alert. So we're always scanning our subconsciously. We're not thinking about it, but we're always scanning our environment. Now there's millions of stimuli hitting us constantly from all directions. We can't process all of them. So our subconscious mind has to determine what are we going to focus on? Well, anything that sticks out, anything that seems important or seems like it could be a threat. Okay. Those are the things that we're looking for subconsciously. So something sticks out of the corner of your eye, you see some movement or you hear a noise, when you're walking down this dark alley, all of a sudden, all your attention stops scanning, boom, and it focuses right on that one thing. Then it hands your attention to system 2. You're thinking, and you determine, is this important? Is this an actual threat? So if all of a sudden you look and it's just a cat running by, not important, your brain goes back to scanning, right? So your conscious system 2 is, like I said, it's in tune with your goals and your values. Your goal is to not get killed by some guy running at you with a knife down a dark alley, right? So once it sees that it's safe, it can go back to scanning and system 1 can take over again. So because system 1 is always scanning and gets easily distracted by anything, again, that sticks out, that is noisy, so to speak, or is potentially threatening, that's why we are very easily distracted.
Interesting. So you're saying that
magicians can misdirect us so easily, they can get our attention somewhere else. And your attention, magicians will dilute it. First they'll direct it, they'll dilute it, they'll distract it, and anything to weaken your attention that allows them to do the secret stuff that makes the miracle happen.
That's really interesting. So what you're saying is that distraction and focus are so intertwined with each other. So you're saying when you're misdirecting or distracting someone, what you're really doing is not distracting them. Well, you are, but you're making them focus on something else.
Exactly.
So yeah, if you have 2 hands, you want them to focus on your left hand when everything's going on the right hand. They're dead focused, even though they're right next to each other. They're dead focused on the thing that's the wrong thing to focus on.
Right. And, we have other ways of misdirecting as well. And one thing that it works incredibly well is if I've got somebody on stage with me, the participant in the trick, and they're usually, if you're doing a performance in front of a large group, you have to have somebody be the proxy for the audience. In other words, if I've got a prop, everybody's suspicious of the prop, right? They're like, I wonder what secret, he's got that deck of cards. I wonder what's gimmicked about it. I bet it's not a normal deck. Well, you can't pass it out to everybody. So you get one person from the audience out, you hand them the deck and they look at it. And since the audience doesn't trust me because I'm a magician, but they do trust that person because they're one of them. Right.
Yeah.
So that's building transparency. And that's a great lesson, that I teach on trust is you've got to build as much transparency, be as transparent as you can about your decision-making so that you can build trust.
Wait, so you have a prop, right?
Yeah.
This prop, you get the audience to look at it. But the thing is there something special about this prop, or is the guy actually looking at this and saying there's nothing wrong with this?
Well, it depends. It depends on the situation. So for example, one trick that I do is a rope trick and I hand the ropes to the person on stage, and they are actually normal ropes.
Okay.
So I hand them to that person, but then I have them start handing them back to me one at a time. And when I have two of them, I have to do a secret move with them that I don't want the audience to see. I'm not going to hide it behind my back because that's going to look suspicious. Mm-hmm. So what I do is I ask the person that I'm with, they've got that third rope in their hand. And I say, you might want to take a look at that third one, because that's the one magicians will usually monkey with if they're going to have a, have a secret in the rope. It's usually that middle length one. So you might want to take a look at that. And so the person looks back at their rope. Everybody in the audience looks at that person looking at the rope, and they're not looking at me, and I can do that little move real quick. They don't know.
Wow.
So that's how easy distraction works. So the thing I like to use is asking the question. If there's somebody, and this works in close-up magic too. If I'm working at a restaurant or an event where I'm going table to table and there's only a couple of people there, if you ask someone a question, where's their attention? It's trying to answer the question.
Yeah.
Their mind, all of a sudden, all their mental energy goes to, how can I answer this question correctly and not look stupid, especially if they're on stage.
If they're on stage, yeah.
They're thinking really, all of a sudden, 100% of their mental energy goes into answering this question. I could do anything, because even if their eyes happen to be on me, they wouldn't notice, because their attention has gone over to working on the answer to this question. If you use humor, that's a great way to misdirect people, because people laugh, and it reduces, that dilutes their attention. It reduces the intensity of it. So yeah, we have a lot of we magicians have a lot of secret tricks to get to dilute your attention. Now, in practical terms for everyday people, and that's what I like to do, is take these things from magic and apply them to how we live our lives and make decisions. As professionals or as students, just in our everyday lives. So we've got that that distraction or that misdirection that's always going on, messing with our attention. The idea of multitasking doesn't work, because your attention cannot be split. Your conscious attention. So this is have you talked on your podcast about the concept of multitasking in the past?
Actually, no, but I read the book called Invisible Gorilla. I'm sure you've heard of like the monkey business solution with Daniel Simons, and just the fact that we literally there could be a gorilla that walks across the room. This is just like your basic experiment. A gorilla walks across the room, and they tell you to look at and try to count the people that are passing the basketballs and how many times the basketball passes. Yet, if a gorilla walks across the room, bats its chest in the middle of the room, and then walks off, only 50% of people see it. And the reason is because we are just so bad at being able to focus and being able to focus on multiple things at one time. We're just so locked in to that basketball game.
Yeah. The first time I saw that, it completely went by me. And then when they showed it again and said, now look for the gorilla, it was like so obvious.
Yeah.
And they call that attention blindness. So because your attention's locked one place, you're completely blind to everything else that's going on. Well, when we multitask, and the distinction I have to make is when you're trying to do two things that require conscious attention.
Okay.
So if you're doing one thing that doesn't take much conscious attention, for example, if you're driving down the highway, you can do that while you're having a conversation with somebody, because you've been driving for your whole life since you were 16, and that it has, that process has gone to your subconscious.
It's automatized.
Right. Yeah. Right. So you now have the mental conscious capacity to do something else, like have a conversation with somebody that's sitting next to you. Now, I don't recommend, talking on your phone while you're trying to drive, because you never know when something's going to need your attention while you're driving. And it's also why, if you're about to merge in traffic and you're having a conversation, you may totally miss that part of the conversation and have to ask the person to repeat themselves because your
Yeah.
conscious attention had to go towards dealing with, the merging, so that part of driving did take your attention away. So when people think they're good multitaskers, what they're actually doing is something called task switching, not multitasking, but task switching. You are switching from one to the other. And what happens is you do neither of them as well as you could if you just did one at a time.
Yeah.
So when you try to multitask and you think I'm a great multitasker, well, no, you're not. You would be better if you did one at a time. And there's different experiments that can really prove how this works and why multitasking is not a real thing. And again, it's when you're trying to do two things that take your conscious attention. Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
Trying to read a book and talk to your spouse, for example, doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah, right. I used to do that all the time. Like I remember in high school, I would do my homework while watching TV. And it was just like I did it for like a year or 2 years until I woke up one day and I realized I was like, dude, I can't even do this. Like, I spend probably like 70% of the time watching TV. It takes me an extra like, I don't know, hour to 2 hours just to get the simple task of homework done. And it sucks. Like it sucks, like I would rather, just sit there, finish the homework and then watch TV.
So let me ask you this. Were you able to make the change once you came to the realization, this isn't really working for me? Were you able to turn off the TV to study? Because when we get into habits like that, it's really hard to break.
So I'll give you my, part of it. So exactly what happened was I realized that I was watching TV because the homework was so damn unstimulating, like I was using it as sort of like a stimulation mechanism, because if I sat there and just did the homework, I would rather fall asleep on the desk than do the homework.
Right.
So, how long did it take me to stop doing it? That's a good question. It probably took me a few months to be able to like wean off it, because you're right. Like homework is incredibly unstimulating. TV is very stimulating. And what I was really doing was using homework as an excuse to spend 70% of my time watching TV.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, that's really interesting. And you say you've talked with other experts on habits and, or did you say that's what your book was about, the hero's journey?
Yeah, my book was about helping people break bad habits. And a big part of that is, stimulation, like I'm sitting there and I'm like, all right, would I rather go on my phone right now, or would I rather get homework done, get work done, work on a project, like create a side project, whatever. And a lot of what your brain is trying to determine is, how stimulating is it? Is it going to release more dopamine? Is it going to release more dopamine if you're going to go on your phone or you're going to do the homework? And unfortunately, the work never wins.
Right. Right. Well, I have a couple daughters that are in their early 20s right now. And when they were home in high school and doing homework with their phones sitting there in front of them with a video on, I'm like, you might be able to do your homework better without it, but I had trouble getting through, and they got good grades, so I really couldn't complain. But I tried to explain multitasking. I will recommend a book called The Myth of Multitasking, and it's by Dave Crenshaw.
I've heard of it before. So I mean, like this is something that I think it's more of like a fallacy. We sit there and we're like, oh, I definitely could watch TV and do work at the same time. When in reality, we kind of know, like we know deep down that we want to do it and we know it's bad for us, yet we can't do it, which is something that people experience all the time.
Right. Right. One of the things that I alluded to earlier that I kind of wanted to touch on was, and this is a preference, so to speak, of the lizard brain, is the preference to avoid uncertainty. Okay. So we love certainty. You mentioned dopamine. When we feel like we know something, we get a hit of dopamine. It's like an aha moment and it feels really good, right? It feels good to say, okay, this is true. And I know that it's true. And so in order to get that hit, we will often have a preference to believe something as certain that we don't have actual certainty about. We don't have enough information to have certainty about, but we believe it anyway. And, and there's all kinds of cognitive biases that play into this, the desire to avoid uncertainty. And, in the wild, you can think about a squirrel in the middle of the road. You're driving and there's that squirrel in the middle of the road. The squirrel that runs off to the side real fast and runs up a tree. Good. It acted with certainty. It stayed alive, right? That squirrel that just starts going one way and changes his mind, starts going the other way. I'm sure you've seen that happen right in front of you. When you're going, that's the kind that's not going to last very long. And so uncertainty is can be very dangerous. So we want to get that feeling of certainty, but that causes all kinds of problems for us, because then we believe things and we say things that aren't true, even though we feel that they are, and we're expressing them as true.
Yeah. Do you have any examples of that?
I do. Here's a great example. Steve Ballmer. He's currently the owner of the LA Clippers NBA team. That's his retirement hobby, though. His real job, he used to be the CEO of Microsoft. Okay. So in 2007, this is in early days of mobile, they were trying to enter the mobile market with the Windows operating system for mobile. Okay. Microsoft was. Well, a competitor of Microsoft's came out with a new product back in 2007. You might have heard of it. It's called the iPhone. So this was brand new. Steve Ballmer said, I think it's likely that the iPhone won't get any significant market share. Now, I always ask my audience, was he right? And the audience says, no, he was wrong. And I say, no, he was right. If he said, I think it's likely that it won't get any significant market share, well, he was right, because that's what he thought. And he said it's likely that. He didn't say for sure. Except I lied. So I apologize, but I lied. Here's what he really said, Nick.
Okay.
He said, there's no chance the iPhone will get a significant market. No chance. And so now, in that case, because of what he really said, yes, he was wrong. He was very wrong.
Yeah.
Microsoft completely failed with their getting Windows as as an operating system for mobile phones, and Apple, they had like 33% of the market. I guess Google had most of the rest. Windows had like 1%. So here's this very smart, very successful guy who's running this, huge company. And he makes this statement with complete certainty, no chance it'll get any significant market share. And he's completely wrong about it.
Yeah.
Well, so if he does that, a big successful guy like that, what chance do we have? Give you one more example. Larry Ellison. He's the 6th richest man in the country. Person in the country. Sorry, don't mean to be sexist. He's the founder and CEO of Oracle. So it's a software company. They make enterprise-wide software. A lot of companies use their software. Well, back a couple decades ago, I guess this was the late 90s, they were coming out with a new version of Oracle. And they had this campaign. Larry Ellison decided to call it Unbreakable. Can't break in, can't break it. That was their motto for this new version of Oracle. Within 2 weeks of releasing it, it got broken into.
That quickly.
Yeah. Wow. So there was a lot of certainty in that motto that they had, that messaging, that branding for that product. Can't break it, unbreakable. And it was wrong. A lot of false certainty.
Yeah. That sounds like the Titanic, right? Like the most unbreakable ship ever,
Right,
I think exactly. There was also a U.S. patent clerk. So he was the commissioner of the U.S. patent clerk of the U.S. Patent Office in 1899. He said, and I quote, "Everything that has ever been invented has already been invented." Like, oh yeah, smart, definitely.
Yeah, not quite. What year was that?
1899.
1899. I'd say a few things have been invented in the last 120 years.
Just a few, like
Yeah, right.
iPhones to name one.
Yeah. So one of the big, some people call this the mother of all biases, comes out of this whole feeling of wanting to avoid uncertainty and feel certain about us, about what we believe, for example, and it's the confirmation bias. So it's the impulse to consume information that supports what we already believe and avoid anything that's going to contradict what we already believe.
Yeah.
And so, with technology the way it is and with media the way it is now, you can pick and choose much more easily than in the old days what you consume, the information that you consume. And so, we tend to get into what they call filter bubbles, because we're, if you look at it from a political standpoint, people on the right are going to look at information that confirms what they believe, so they'll go to right-leaning media sources. People on the left, they're going to go to left-leaning media sources. So they're going to be watching I like the term, Scott Adams uses this term, you're watching a different movie. You're each watching a movie about something, about Donald Trump or Joe Biden or whatever, but it's a completely different movie because you're getting different information. You're getting the information that makes you feel good about what you believe, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to hear something that causes cognitive dissonance that goes against what you believe, because it doesn't feel good. It introduces uncertainty.
Exactly. Actually, that was one of the craziest, finding that I've ever maybe heard of is they actually found that when let's say you're on the right leaning and you see something that you agree with, actually it releases more dopamine than if you see something that you disagree with. And that, I guess makes sense a little bit, but we don't really understand the implications of that. What dopamine does is dopamine increases your focus, right? So imagine dopamine is, okay, oh, I see a deer, let me go hunt it. Oh, I see some food, let me go get it, right? So I need to focus on it. And what really happens is you're sitting there and you say, okay, I am on the left and I see a left-leaning, something that I agree with on the left. You're actually going to be able to focus on it so much better than if you see something that you disagree with. Your brain's just going to say, oh, there's no need to focus on this. This is just hooey or whatever, and it's as if, like we have this literal mental blockage. And I've experienced this all the time, like things that I just like viscerally disagree with. I say, okay, cognitively, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to listen to the other side. I'm going to do the right thing and listen to the thing that I disagree with. And then halfway through reading the paper, I'm like, I can't even focus. Like I can't even get myself to do this.
Yeah.
And of course, like it has a big effect, as you probably know.
And this is one of the big ahas that I've had during my journey of learning about how our minds work and how we get distracted and have illusions that we think are real that aren't real, that the lizard brain is hitting us with.
Yeah.
And one of the big ahas was that how strongly we want to feel that our beliefs are right and don't want to change them, and how important it is to be open to changing our beliefs, to not hold them so strongly. Now, your values are part of you, and usually values are not changeable. What you value is probably part of who you are, but your beliefs are based on evidence, right? I believe this is true. Because every idea, every thought that we have, every thought that gets presented to us, we attach to it a tag that says true or false. And how much confidence do I have that this is true or false? So the thought doesn't just come to us. We immediately make a determination about it based on what we know. Well, based on a lot of things, but, based on what we know and how we feel about it. Well, if we get other evidence that contradicts it, we need to be able to change our beliefs.
Yeah.
If we want to grow, if we want to improve, if we want to be smarter, be more savvy, be less susceptible to illusion, we have to be willing to change our beliefs. And I'm going to give you another book recommendation. And this is one of the best books I have read in the last year. And I've read quite a bit. And it's Think Again by Adam Grant.
Adam Grant. Yes, I know Adam Grant. Think Again. Okay.
Yeah, this was his latest book, and it is fantastic. The Power of Knowing What You Don't Know is his subtitle there. Bill and Melinda Gates call it a must read.
So is that exactly what it's about? Is it mostly political, or is it?
No, it's not political at all. Yeah, no, not at all. And it's in fact, one thing I like about Adam Grant is he's like me. He hates politics. And I have a strong aversion to political ideology and the two-party system. I think that it's poison. It actually makes you dumber if you are aligned with a political ideology. There are studies that show that your ability to process information goes down.
Really?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So it's amazing. Yeah. And most people are, and the polarization is a big problem for us as a society, even worldwide, but for us as a society to make positive change, to fix our problems, we are much slower and have an inability to do that because of political ideology. And I could go on and on about that, but I don't really want to get too much into.
Well, here's the thing: the meat of what you're saying is that maybe to some degree, right? This political ideology and forming groups and picking a side and all these things is easier, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's so easy because you pick your group, and then whenever you see something that your group agrees with, right, pick your side, then you're just going to agree with it, and it's that easy, right? But
it's easy and it feels good. Yeah.
Yes, and it feels good. Like, that's amazing. But if you actually have to sit down and think, okay, I don't have a group. What do I believe? What do I want? Let's look at the facts and let's figure it out. That doesn't release as much dopamine. That doesn't make you feel as good. You're not able to focus on it as much, and it's damn hard. And the bias, that's a huge part of confirmation bias. It says, all right, if you just emotionally pick a side and then go with it, then, well, that's the end of the process. You don't really have to do anything.
Yeah. I came up with a term that I call information courage. And it's exactly what you're talking about. It takes, and I wrote a blog post about this not too long ago. It takes courage to face information, to face real information, and information that doesn't make you feel good, that makes you have to think, and that maybe is different from what you believe. You have to have courage to do that because it's hard and it's scary. And if you all of a sudden, you're afraid too that people are going to call you wishy-washy or, say that you don't have any beliefs. Oh, you used to believe this and now you believe that. Well, yeah, because I know more now than I knew before, right? Yeah. Because I discovered this, or a new study came out about this, or, I became, I talked to this person and they had this experience and that showed me that, so I learned more. And you should actually, Daniel Kahneman says he likes when he discovers that he has been wrong. He likes having been wrong. And I'm like, you think, why would you like to be wrong? And it's because that means now if he realizes he was wrong, that means he's less wrong now, right?
Yeah.
So it's good to realize you were wrong. So, having your beliefs, what's the phrase I think Adam Grant has used in the past is have strong beliefs loosely held. So, you can have strong beliefs and have strong opinions, but be willing to change them if the information that you have changes, if you learn more. And it's very, like you said, it's very hard to do.
I mean, that's the biggest thing, it really sort of blows my mind, You were working in IT for 30 years, 30 years. Someone could easily say, oh, he has an uncertainty bias. He's going to stay with this job. And that's, sort of, well, the way most people act, right? I have a lot of friends in, again, finance who have this belief, who tell me that I'm going to go into finance for, 2 to 3 years and then I'll get out and then I'll just leave and then I'll do my passion project and do whatever I want. But the reality is that's not very realistic. Like the chances of you being able to do that are just so low that, well, there's, out of all the people who say they're just going to get out, not all of them get out, and there's a very good chance that you're going to be one of them. And the big reason why is because unlike my friend Steve Haffner over here, they didn't come up to the realization I could leave. I could just do it. And I'm going to some degree, right, throw caution to the wind, but also keep a little bit of certainty and do it. Like, I think those big decisions that you were talking about before, like we're so prone to this uncertainty bias that we don't actually make a rational decision.
Yeah. Well, and it did take me 30 years, but, and what happens after, and there's I hope it doesn't come across that I think that getting into business or finance or IT or anything like that is a bad thing, because it's not. It's definitely, and that can be passion, that can play to your strengths. Nothing wrong with that at all. But you get invested. So you've been in it a couple of years, and it makes it really difficult to get out because you've invested your time and energy in it, and you have built a foundation, for that career. So just jumping out of it and starting over in something else, well, that doesn't feel like a good thing to do. And in some cases it's not, so.
Yeah, and stability feels nice, like being in a nice, stable, making a good salary. You probably had to put yourself out there, following your dreams is so hard. It's so hard doing the things, I think there was a great quote by the lady who runs QVC on Shark Tank, right? She goes, entrepreneurs are the people who are willing to work 80 hours a week so they don't have to work 40. And I couldn't agree more.
Right. Yeah. Too bad I haven't been able to do what, Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Work Week. I haven't been able to implement that yet, unfortunately.
Yeah, I read that book too. I think a lot of it, well, that's part of the, entrepreneurial idea, the dogma that sort of gets thrown out there is that it's easy to be an entrepreneur. And a big reason, and like the yachts and, oh, look how wonderful it is and all of this. What people are really saying is, let's give them some motivation so they can leave, so they could start. Because if I actually told you that it's super hard, you're going to have to work 80 hours a week, you're most likely going to fail at least 6 times, and you're going to blah, 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 you're not even going to want to start. Your uncertainty bias is just going to be like, whoa, I'm sure that as you're on this magician experience, trying to really start essentially a new career, that you encountered a lot of failure and it was difficult and a lot of stress and all of these things. So I don't know. Maybe this will say a lot of the make it look easy type things actually serves a little bit of purpose, which makes me think.
Yeah. And I think it's like emotion, because, I talk a lot about how we let emotion make our decisions for us. And emotion is a great catalyst as far as motivation, getting us to move. But when it comes to decision making, we need to not let emotions make our decisions for us, because emotions are not rational, and you can make a lot of bad decisions if you make them based on emotion. But I'm not saying emotions in and themselves are bad. They're part of who we are, part of being human, even negative ones, but it's often the negative ones that get in the way of rational decision making, so yeah, that the emotion, that anticipation of, jumping into something where you can make a lot of money or feel really good because you're following your passion, that's a big emotional pull, and it serves a purpose. You're right in that, but you still need to take a sober look at it and say, okay, I've got this emotion driving me, but let's look at what actually is going to happen and make decisions and anticipate probabilities of what could happen and what I would do in each probability.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's such a difficult thing to talk about. Like, I would definitely want to push back a little bit and say, like, you asked a question, right? For the people who decide to go to the gym, let's say, you've been packing on pounds, you gained like 60 pounds over the last like 4 years, you've been eating unhealthy, and you haven't even stepped in a gym. What is the thing, and for years you're saying, oh, I should really get to the gym. I should really, really get to the gym. And you say that every day, what is the thing that really pushes someone over the edge? It's always an emotional decision. It's always, you know what, tomorrow I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to do it. I'm going to sign up for a gym membership and I'm just going to get to it. And the emotion is really pushing the action. But then I agree with you, which, the next step is sort of, all right, so what should my plan be, right? Like once we get there, it's like, well, I'm not just going to like do the typical thing and have the New Year's resolution that fails after 2 weeks and call it a day. No, I'm going to get a structure. I'm going to get a plan. I'm going to learn about how I could, get better fitness and then work from there.
You want me to tell you my story about that exactly?
Sure.
Because yeah. I can tell you, I have recently done almost exactly what you're talking about. So 2020, I'm a professional speaker. 2020 shut my business down pretty much completely. Everything got canceled or postponed, and I went to depression, had a lot of anxiety. What am I going to do now?
Of course.
And I ate too much of the wrong food, drank more than I should have, did a lot of the things that a lot of people did, put on the COVID-19, they say. And it was, and I knew it. I knew that wasn't sustainable, to live like that. And come the end of the year, I'm like, man, and that's why, okay, I did a whole thing on New Year's resolutions and most of them fail. Most people don't succeed at them, but
95%. Yeah.
But it's that turning over to a new year. That's that emotional thing. That's that thing that, okay, here's something that it's a new year. Now I'm going to do it, Well, I stepped on the scale on December 28th and I was like, what? I'm like, I got to get this handled. So I made a plan and I made it a sustainable plan. I said, I'm not going to jump on some diet, fad diet and do something to lose pounds and then go back to the way I was. Yeah. I'm going to change the way I'm doing things. And so I set a goal and it was a reasonable goal. 6 months. I said, by the end of June, I want to lose 20 pounds. Okay. So that's definitely not unreasonable, 20 pounds in 6 months. Right. And I said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start intermittent fasting. So, you've probably heard of that. And I did the 16-8 method where I go 16 hours where I don't eat and just eat during an 8-hour window.
Which is so good for you. Incredibly good for you.
Yeah. Yeah. So in a lot of different ways. And one of the ways is it reduces your calories because you're not snacking at night. You're not eating breakfast. And I thought, and this is a great lesson for me. I thought there's no way I'm going to be able to do that. I love eating breakfast. I wake up in the morning and I'm hungry and I'm like, oh, I can't wait to have some eggs and toast or whatever. Yeah. I thought I'm not going to be able to do this. And once I started doing it, I found, hey, I can do this. It's not as hard as I thought it was. We have the ability to do more than we can,
True.
That was a lesson I learned from that. I have 2 big glasses of water. I started hydrating more because I've read about how good that is for you and how good it is for your brain, especially. So I drink 2 big, about a quart of water and have some coffee and I'm not hungry. I'm like, okay, I'm okay. Late in the morning, I started to get a little bit hungry, but, then 11:30 was the end of my period and I could have my lunch. So I did that. I've always worked out at the gym. But I increased it, started, doing a little bit more. I always take a mile walk first thing when I get up in the morning. Well, I increased that to a mile and a half. So I changed my eating habits a little bit, but didn't do a whole lot besides the intermittent fasting, definitely reduced the amount of beer I was drinking, which had gotten, and I did more moderation, drinking lower calorie beer and, a little less, so it's just reasonable. And, I hit my goal of 20 pounds.
Wow.
Within like 4.5 months, I think I hit it.
Wow. Yeah.
And I've dropped a few more since. So,
well, you look great, right?
Thank you. Yeah, I had seen a picture of myself. So I'm in the Louisville Magic Club, as a magician, and there was a
Of
picture somebody
course.
had taken of the audience, of us at a Magic Club meeting, and I saw myself, and it's like, is that what I look like? I'm like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
I need to lose weight. I look like they just fished me out of the river or something. This is terrible.
Yeah, I mean
Yeah,
it's incredible. I mean, one of the things that I think is a great lesson to take from your story is like you didn't do anything crazy,
no,
like you didn't adopt like eating 600 calories in a day or like working out 2 hours a day or working out 1 hour from zero. You just like increased it a little bit. You
yep,
started taking longer walks, you started going to the gym a little more, you made a minor shift. And what you're saying is that was rational, that was completely rational. And like I think personally, I overestimate what I have to do to get my goals. So like someone could easily have said, okay, 20 pounds. What do I need to do to lose 20 pounds? I need to work out 3 hours a day. I need to eat only 600 calories, and really make it, well, inaccurately predict how long it takes and how much it takes for you to lose pounds. But
yeah,
all you did was a simple fix, a lifestyle change, and that was what made the difference.
right, exactly. Now, a couple other things. Well, one other thing that I did that I think is helpful in any kind of decision making, um, is setting what's called a tripwire. So, a book by Dan Heath and Chip Heath called Decisive. I learned this from,
Book
and
number 3.
yeah. In fact, look up all their books. I've read at least 3 of theirs. There's one called Switch about making change. There's one called Made to Stick about how to make your messages memorable and stick. But anyway, I digress. This one's called Decisive. And so here's the thing when you're setting goals, to remember is that you are 2 people. You're schizophrenic. You're a doer and you're a planner. The planner is the system 2 person that can set goals and think about how you're going to achieve them. But the doer is the one that actually has to execute. And the doer is the one that's susceptible to all those kind of biases and emotions and spur of the moment, impulses that make it hard to do what the planner wants to do. And that's why it's hard to follow through on New Year's resolutions. So one of the things that you have to do is think ahead of time. How can you make it easier for your future doer to do what you want it to do? And one thing is setting a tripwire. So that is setting, if you've got a project or you've got a decision, you're going to try to get this done by a certain date, you've got a goal, set one or more tripwires during the way where you're going to, when you hit that tripwire, a reminder on your calendar or something says, when I hit this point, here's what I'm going to look at. What progress have I made? And you get specific about it. If I haven't made this progress, what do I have to change? So what I did is I set a 3 months in. So that's halfway through my 6-month period of weight loss. Okay. And I set a certain weight loss goal. I think it was 12 pounds because you're going to lose more weight early in the process.
Yeah.
And I set a goal weight and I put it on my calendar because I made a weight log too. Tracking is important for me, especially. I need to track because I want to be able to look and see on a spreadsheet exactly what's happening. And that spurs me to be able to make the change I need because I can see precisely what the data is,
It keeps you conscious, instead of just kind of letting you run in the autopilot.
Exactly. Keeps it top of mind. So I set, I had my whole calendar through the end of June, from the beginning of the year through the end of June. I had a separate line for each week. And halfway through, I highlighted it in yellow and I put a note on it that said, if I have not lost 12 pounds by this point, I'm going to implement portion control. So that was one thing that I knew would be helpful, but I was doing these other things. And I thought, well, let's see if in portion control, I mean like counting calories for each meal and that kind of thing. And I didn't really want to do that if I didn't have to, because it sounded like a real pain in the butt, So it's like, well, if intermittent fasting, I also implemented HIIT, HIIT in my workouts.
High intensity
interval training. Yeah.
Interval training. Yeah.
Right. And, and that was another thing that I added, so I said, if I haven't hit 12 pounds at this point, when I hit this tripwire, well, I'm going to start doing portion control. So in any kind of goal that you set some points along the way where you're going to assess what you're doing. So always assess and adjust as you go if you need to, because we're heading in a direction, but we can veer off and we need to get ourselves back in the right direction.
So what do you do in the case of the actual decision? When you're making a decision and let's say, you're deciding between whether or not you want to start this business, or, eat pork versus eat, I don't know, like cake, whatever, right? What do you do to sort of counteract these biases,
Well, it does depend on the specific decision. And one of the things, and this again, I got from that book on called Decisive, is we have to widen our options. So we have this inclination to make decisions between two things. Usually it's between doing this new thing and not doing it. But, and decisions fail at a much higher rate when we're making a decision between only two things than we are when we're considering more options. So thinking about what other options are available to you besides the one you're just thinking about. One of the ways that they recommend doing this is if you think about, what are all your options that you could do at this point, and you're trying to make a decision, what's the best one to do? And once you've thought about them, got to use your imagination, pretend that they're all off the table. For some reason, you can't do those. Now what are you going to do? And that stimulates your mind to think in different ways and to go a little bit further than you normally would have and think, okay, I can't do these, what I thought was the number one option. Now I can't do. What am I going to do? And you start to think and you come up with other options. So the more viable options that you can come, and some options, of course, are going to be crazy that you come up with, but the more viable options that you can come up with, the better chance you are going to have of making a good decision.
Makes sense. So it's like you're sitting there and you're like, should I have McDonald's or should I have a home cooked meal that I'm not, like the frozen food that I'm not really interested at home? And then maybe you could choose a third option, which is like go out and buy a salad or something like that. Right.
Well, here's another thing, because you do have to take into consideration willpower, and it's very difficult to like eat a salad or eat an extremely healthy meal every meal,
Agreed.
Never have a hamburger. So set a limit, a moderation, and say, who was it? It might've been Tim Ferriss. I don't know. Somebody that I had read was talking about
Tim Ferriss. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And he talked about, I think it was, I don't know if it was about eating or drinking, if he's out with friends, and if he said, I'm only going to allow myself, like 2 drinks on a weekend, and somebody offers him something and he said, I can't, I've already done my 2 drinks. So you set yourself a non-negotiable, and it's moderation because you allow yourself some fun to do some things that maybe aren't healthy, but you enjoy, but you set in stone, you put a stake in the ground and say, this is as much as I can do. And once you hit that, well, it takes the decision out of the doer's hands. Your planner is helping your doer, because your doer, hey, it's not my decision. I've already had my 2 beers for the weekend. Nothing I can do about it. Sorry. You made a non-negotiable to yourself, and you don't have to think about it.
Yeah. I mean, actually Tim Ferriss, I thought you were going a different direction, but yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting one. I tried that. The only problem I had with it was that like, I just couldn't stick to it. Like, my friends would be like, oh, I'm like, all right, I only want to spend X amount. But my friends are like, oh, you want to go out and get food? I'm like,
I know.
I guess so. Yeah. One of the things, this is what Tim Ferriss said, which I thought is also really interesting. It's just a different strategy. He says, set a diet, like in this specifically for dieting, eat healthy, right? Eat the stuff that you should be eating and all this stuff, and really control your impulses. But then pick one day in the week. For me, it's Sunday. This is what I do. Pick one day in the week, and that is the day where you could break all of your rules. every rule that you set,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I can't have added sugar, I can't have caffeine, I can't have all these things. That's your one day to break all your rules. And what it really does is it's like a way to keep your impulses in check so that, they're not just sort of building up. Instead, it gets flushed out every single week. And, you maintain that strong consistency throughout the week.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's exactly the same, just a different way to go about it is, letting your, not completely shutting yourself off, letting yourself have a little bit of of fun,
Yeah, like a
so to speak.
leash. Yeah,
Yeah.
giving your
Yeah.
doer a little leash.
Yeah. But, but him by doing it one day a week, and maybe that's easier for somebody to say, is today Saturday? Well, today's not Saturday. Can't do it.
Yeah,
Than to say I've had my 2 beers and I can't have any more. Whatever, whatever works for you. You're helping your doer, taking the decision making out of the hands of the doer, who is more likely to stray from what you really want. So
exactly. And I think the science of decisions is something that we should just all really focus on. Like, I really commend you for being able to be like, all right, decisions are the most important thing that we do all the time. Like, our day consists of our decisions, and therefore our personalities, our lives, our worlds are shaped by our decisions. So, Steve Haffner, thank you for coming on, and thank you for sharing this light with us.
Oh, you are welcome. It's been great talking to you. And you make 35,000 decisions every day. And if you could
Wow.
improve just 1% of them, that would be a huge, would make a big difference in your life. So if you can,
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Nick Lugo Show. Always make sure to check out the sponsors in the description below, and to like, subscribe, and give 5 stars, and in whatever way you can, because, well, I hope to spread this podcast and these episodes with more people, and you could help me do that. I always love to end my podcast with one quote, and this quote is my favorite of all time. It's by Viktor Frankl in his book, Man's Search for Meaning. Ever more people today have the means to live, but no meaning to live for. Think about that quote, and, well, have a good day.